My friends, let us come together in a spirit of deep stillness and receptivity, for the truth we are about to consider cannot be grasped through the intellect, nor can it be approached as one more idea added to our storehouse of beliefs. It must be felt within, recognized in the quietness of our own being. There comes a moment in the life of every seeker when the question of life and death, of the appearing and disappearing of form, stands before us not as theology, not as philosophy, but as direct experience. It is in this moment that the truth of our identity is revealed most clearly if we are willing to see it. We have, for centuries, regarded death as an enemy, as a dark and terrible event that closes the door upon all that we have known. Yet this fear has been born only of one mistake: the belief that life is in the body, that the body is the self, and that the dissolution of the physical form is the dissolution of our being. This, my friends, is the great misunderstanding. The body is not the life. Consciousness is the life. The I that I am is the life eternal. And when we begin to perceive this, even faintly, the fear of death begins to lose its power over us. In the final months of my earthly life, there was no battle with death, no desperate attempt to hold the body together, no appeal to an external God to preserve a form that was never the seat of identity. Instead, there was only the quiet recognition that the life which animates, sustains, and maintains itself as this awareness has no beginning and no ending. What appears as birth, what appears as death, these are movements within consciousness, but they do not touch the one who witnesses them. And so, as we enter this subject today, let us not approach it as though we were studying the end of something. We are studying the revelation of something. We are studying the moment in which the personal sense of life falls away and the presence that has always been there, the I that is God, itself expressing as individual consciousness, shines forth in its purity. We are studying the truth that stands behind the veil of appearances. Let your heart be at ease. We are not here to contemplate loss, but to recognize gain. We are not here to mourn the frailty of the form, but to witness the eternality of the formless. And as we proceed, let us hold this one simple truth before us. No one has ever died. Forms have come and gone. Bodies have appeared and disappeared. But the invisible presence, the I that is God, remains untouched, unchanged, eternally expressing itself as the life you are. When we see this clearly, the great fear dissolves, and it is in this dissolving that true freedom begins. My friends, let us look gently and honestly at this matter of fear. For fear is not conquered by force, nor is it dissolved by effort. Fear is dispelled only by light, by the recognition of what is eternally true. And nowhere is fear more deeply rooted in human consciousness than in the belief that life can be taken from us, that existence can be threatened, and that identity can come to an end. It is very important that we do not condemn ourselves for this fear. Even the most sincere spiritual seeker may find that when the sense world presses upon him with its testimony of pain, decline, or danger, an instinctive tightening arises. This is not a moral failing, nor is it proof that we have been unfaithful to truth. It is simply the residue of centuries of conditioning human belief accepted as reality long before we had awakened to the nature of our true being. The universal fear of death is not personal. It is not your fear or my fear. It is the collective fear of a world that has identified itself with the body, this temporary form, this garment of flesh, and has forgotten the invisible life that animates it. When we speak of death, we are really speaking of the belief that life is in matter, dependent upon matter, and vulnerable because matter is subject to change. Let us understand this clearly. Fear persists only where we still believe we are separate from the source of life. Fear lives only in the conviction that we are self-contained, isolated beings struggling to preserve our existence. But the very moment we glimpse even faintly that the life we are living is not personal life but God life, not human existence but divine expression, that fear begins to lose its footing. Many spiritual seekers wonder, why, after all my study, all my meditation, all my spiritual practice, does fear still arise when the body is threatened? The answer is simple. The surface mind has accepted the truth, but it has not yet permeated the deeper levels of conditioning. We may intellectually declare, I am eternal, yet still reflexively behave as though the body were our life. These two layers must become one. And so I say to you with tenderness, do not be discouraged when fear appears. Fear appearing is not a sign of spiritual failure, it is an invitation to deeper recognition. It is the opportunity to turn once again to the truth that the life you are is not in the body, nor is it subject to the changes that touch the body. Fear arises only because we have momentarily forgotten who we are. And the moment we remember, truly remember, not as a belief but as a simple recognition, fear dissolves, not because we have pushed it away, but because there is nothing left in us for it to cling to. Every fear is a shadow of forgotten truth, and death is the greatest shadow of all. But when the light of I Am dawns in consciousness, even this shadow cannot remain. Now, let us turn gently to that period in which the physical form known as Joel Goldsmith moved toward its conclusion. I speak of these things not to stir emotion, nor to create a story about a person, but to show you how the principles we study become living demonstration when appearances grow most intense. The outer scene of those final months was simple: a body in decline, symptoms increasing, strength diminishing, and the natural processes that accompany the closing of physical life making themselves known. To the human eye, this is the point at which fear rises most sharply. The world believes that when the body weakens, life weakens. When the body deteriorates, identity deteriorates. When the body comes to its end, the person comes to an end. But this is precisely the moment when the one who has lived in truth knows that none of this touches the reality of being. During those days, there was pain, there was limitation, there was what the world calls terminal illness. But listen carefully. There was no personal sense of suffering, because the one who had spent a lifetime practicing the presence did not identify himself with the sensations of the body. He acknowledged them, yes, of course. Denial never plays a part in spiritual realization, but he did not take ownership of them. He allowed the body to be the body, the appearance to be the appearance, while resting in that quiet inner knowing, I am the life which is God. I am the presence that neither waxes nor wanes. I am the awareness in which this body appears, moves, and eventually dissolves. There was no attempt to force healing, no attempt to cling to physical continuity. Why? Because he understood the body to be an instrument useful for a time, then released when its function is complete. There is no tragedy in this, any more than there is tragedy in setting aside a garment that has become worn. The garment serves its purpose and is laid aside, but the one who wore it continues unchanged. And so the atmosphere around him in those days was one of quietness, not darkness, not fear, not dread quietness, a deep stillness that arises when the battle with appearances has ended, when consciousness no longer tries to control, improve, or preserve form, but simply beholds. Those who were near him reported no sense of struggle, no frantic searching for remedies, no pleading for intervention. There was only a soft resting in the presence that had guided his entire journey. That resting was not resignation, let us be clear. Resignation is a gesture of defeat. This was recognition. Recognition that the life which lived as Joel Goldsmith was never born into a body and could not be removed by the departure of a body. Recognition that the I which spoke through him from the beginning was the same I that existed before Abraham was, the same I that is the life of every individual who hears these words now. It is important to see the outer scene only as context, not as truth. The truth was in the stillness, in the non-reaction, in the peaceful abiding. The truth was in the refusal to accept the body's condition as a statement about identity. And in this way, even the final days of the physical form became a teaching not in words, but in demonstration. This is the opportunity every one of us has, not merely at the end of life, but every time the body or circumstances bear witness to change. The appearance is never the truth. The truth stands behind it as the silent, eternal presence that is our very being. Now, my friends, let us look more deeply at what was taking place during those final months, for this is where the real teaching lies. The outer appearance of a declining body is of no great significance. Bodies come and go, and they have done so since time began. What matters is the state of consciousness from which we meet these appearances. This is the entire secret of spiritual life, the recognition of the I that is eternal, even as the forms through which it expresses rise and fall in their appointed season. The inner practice in those days was the same practice that had been lived for decades. No new technique was introduced, no special meditation for the dying, no urgent prayer for deliverance. For truth does not change with circumstances. Truth is the same whether we are walking through a garden or lying upon a sick bed. And so the practice was simply this: resting in the awareness of I am. I am the presence that has no beginning and no ending. I am the life that is self-sustained and self-complete. I am the light that cannot be dimmed by shadows of material belief. I am the only identity anyone has ever had. In that recognition, there is no need to resist sensations, no need to argue with the body's condition, no need to attempt to shape appearances by thought. The mind grows very quiet, for it is no longer trying to control life. It is simply resting in life itself. This resting is not passivity. It is the highest form of activity, though it appears outwardly as stillness. It is the activity of divine awareness flowing without obstruction. It is the activity of truth dissolving the belief in a personal self. It is the activity of light, revealing that there is no darkness except the shadow cast by ignorance. During those days, there would be times when the body expressed discomfort, yet there was no inward tightening, no sense of this is happening to me. There was only the recognition. This, too, is an appearance in consciousness. It is not the truth of my being. And in that non-identification, suffering could not take root. Sensation may arise in the body, but suffering requires a me to suffer, and that me had long since been seen as an illusion. This is the heart of the inner practice, allowing everything to be as it is on the plane of appearance, while resting firmly in the knowing of what is true on the plane of reality. The spiritual student does not attempt to heal appearances. The spiritual student awakens to the truth behind appearances, and the truth is always this: the I that you are does not enter the body at birth, nor does it leave the body at death. The I that you are is the witnessing presence, not the form, witnessed. The I that you are is the life that lives itself, untouched by decay, untouched by endings, untouched by change. To rest in this recognition is to walk in the freedom of the sons of God. And it is this recognition, this silent, effortless recognition, that carried the transition peacefully, naturally, and without fear. For when one abides in I am, there is no death to face, only a gentle releasing of the temporary form through which this infinite presence once expressed. This is not something reserved for a few. It is the natural heritage of every individual who turns within and acknowledges, I live, yet not I, but the Christ. This I am is the life that lives me. Let us go deeper now into this word immortality, for it is a term so often misunderstood. The world hears the word and imagines a personal life extended indefinitely, a human identity preserved eternally, or a body made indestructible by spiritual power. But, my friends, none of this is what immortality means in the life of the spirit. What is immortal is not the personality. What is immortal is not the human sense of self. What is immortal is not the body or the circumstances of our earthly journey. Immortality belongs only to that which was never born and therefore can never die. And so the first great revelation we must come to is this: there is no such thing as personal immortality. The person, as the world knows it, the name, the form, the accumulated history, has no continuity in spirit. The person appears in time and is dissolved in time, but the life that animates that person, the consciousness that shines through it, the presence that says I, that is eternal, that is the only immortality there is. When I speak of immortality, I speak of that which is alive right now as the awareness hearing these words. I speak of the one who is conscious of existing, yet whose existence does not depend upon the body, nor upon the world, nor upon any external condition. This I, this pure, unconditioned awareness, is the Christ, the Self, the infinite way. It does not begin at conception, nor does it end at death. It stands ever present behind all appearances. The purpose of spiritual living is not to preserve the body forever, but to awaken to the truth that the body is not the seat of your identity. In this awakening, fear dissolves, not because we have conquered death, but because we have seen that nothing real can die. What dies is the picture, what dies is the form, what dies is the mask through which the infinite has temporarily expressed, but the infinite itself remains unchanged. If you examine the great statements of the Master, you will find that he never identified life with the body. He said, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. He said, before Abraham was, I am. He said, I am the resurrection and the life. These statements do not refer to a man. They refer to the eternal presence speaking through the man. The I am is the immortality of every individual. This is why, in those final days, there was no sense of loss, no anticipation of ending, no clinging to the form. There was only the recognition that the I which had lived the entire span of the human experience was the same I that lived before that experience began and would continue after that experience concluded. Immortality, then, is not something to be attained. It is not a reward. It is not a future state. Immortality is the present reality of your being. It is the truth that is already here, already complete, already expressing itself as the consciousness that is aware in this moment. You do not become immortal. You awaken to the immortality that has always been yours. The more clearly this truth is realized, the more gently we move through life, for all fear of loss is rooted in the belief that what we are can be diminished. And once that belief dissolves, a great peace arises, an unshakable peace, a peace not dependent upon circumstance. This is the immortality Joel Goldsmith revealed, not in theory, but in living demonstration. And it is this immortality that you, too, will feel. the moment you turn within and recognize, I am the life eternal, appearing now as this individual expression, yet untouched by all the changes on the surface of experience. As we move further into this sacred subject, let us turn our attention away from the outer picture of declining physical form and consider the inner experience, for the outer appearance of a dissolving body tells us nothing about the life that is living itself. Truth reveals itself not in what the senses behold, but in the awareness with which we meet the senses' report. And so, in those final months, the essential activity was not of the body, nor of the mind, but of consciousness resting in its own eternal nature. There were moments when the body spoke loudly, moments of discomfort, moments of fatigue, moments in which the natural processes of physical dissolution made themselves known. Yet even in these moments, there was no inner disturbance, for the one beholding these sensations was not identified with them. That is the great key. Sensations arose in the body, but there was no me in them. They appeared, they passed, and they had no power to create suffering because there was no personal self claiming them. This inner state was not produced through effort. It was not a discipline imposed upon the mind. It was the natural fruit of decades spent in the quiet recognition that I can of mine own self do nothing, and that the life which animates us is God, appearing as individual being. When one has lived from this recognition long enough, identity shifts. The personal sense of self dissolves little by little, and in its place arises the awareness of I am, the universal identity expressing as the individual. It is this shift that made possible the profound peace present in those final days. There was no internal conversation of why is this happening or how can I change this, for those questions belong only to the mind that believes itself separate. Instead, there was a simple and natural abiding. The body is doing what bodies do, but I am not the body. I am the life that witnesses the body. Some have imagined that spiritual mastery means the body should always respond instantly to truth, or that the physical form should be immune to decline. But this is a misunderstanding rooted in the belief that spirit exists to preserve matter. Spirit does not preserve matter. Spirit reveals itself through matter for a season in its own perfect way. And when that season is complete, spirit continues without interruption, without loss, without change. This is what was unfolding within. The inner experience was quiet, not dramatic, not filled with visions or heavenly signs. There were no triumphal declarations, no ecstatic revelations, just a deep, unbroken awareness of presence. A simple knowing, I am, I always have been, I always will be. The form may fade, but I do not. This simplicity is what many seekers overlook. They expect the spiritual path to culminate in great supernatural display, but true realization is not supernatural. It is utterly natural, so natural, in fact, that the world often misses it. It comes with no fireworks, only the gentle disappearance of fear, the quiet dissolution of resistance, the soft abiding in what has always been present. And so, as the body declined, the consciousness behind the form grew clearer, more transparent, more free. There was no clinging, because there was nothing to cling to. There was no fear, because there was no belief in separation from life. There was no sorrow, because what could be lost? The form? Yes. But the self? Never. This is what Goldsmith experienced internally, a deep continuity of being, unbroken by the appearance of bodily change. And you, too, may taste the same continuity, not by imitating an attitude, but by recognizing the truth that the I which lives you now is the same I that lived him, the same I that lives all. The body passes, but I am remains. Now, my friends, let us gently turn from the appearance of one man's transition and consider what this demonstration reveals about your own life, your own consciousness, your own journey on this path. For the significance of those final days lies not in the story of Joel Goldsmith, but in the light they shed upon the truth of your being. Every event in the life of a spiritual teacher holds meaning only to the degree that it awakens recognition within you. And so we ask, what does this reveal about the life you are living now? First, it reveals that the fear of death, the deepest fear known to humanity, is not dissolved by changing circumstances, but by changing identity. You do not overcome fear by adjusting the conditions of your human experience. You overcome fear only by recognizing that the one who seems to fear is not the one you truly are. When identity shifts from the personal self to the I am, fear naturally dissolves, because the I am cannot be threatened. Second, his passing shows us that your security has never depended on the body. Your safety, your continuity, your very existence do not rest upon the strength of your physical form. The body may be healthy or ill, young or old, vigorous or frail, but the life that animates it remains untouched. When you recognize this, truly recognize it, you begin to meet life's challenges with a calmness the world cannot understand. You begin to live from a place of stability that is not conditioned by the senses. Third, you discover that nothing in your experience is as serious as you once believed. When you look at your life from the perspective of eternal being, the troubles that once seemed overwhelming lose their weight. Financial pressures, relationship tensions, bodily discomforts. These remain the appearances they always were, but the sense of me that struggles with them begins to fade. You learn to let things arise and pass without being shaken, because you are centered in the awareness that beholds them. Fourth, you are shown that spiritual realization is practical. It is not something reserved for moments of meditation or spiritual ecstasy. It is not something to be attained in the final days of life. It is to be lived now in the midst of your daily responsibilities, your everyday interactions, your ordinary challenges. Every moment is an opportunity to rest in the truth that the life you are is not the life of the body, not the life of the personality, but the life of God expressing as individual being. Fifth, you learn that the transition called death is not a dramatic event. It is not a rupture in consciousness. It is not a moment of terror or sudden awakening. It is simply the continuation of the same life that is present right now. The consciousness you bring to this moment is the consciousness you bring to that moment. If you live now with fear, you carry fear into that transition. If you live now in recognition, you carry recognition. And so the true work is always here, always now. Finally, his passing teaches you that you are not walking toward a final moment of loss. You are walking toward the deeper unveiling of what you already are. Every day, every challenge, every joy, every sorrow, every appearance of change is part of the slow, gentle dissolving of the belief that you are separate from the source of your being. And as this belief fades, you begin to live differently. You become less reactive, more spacious, more compassionate, not because you try to be, but because the false sense of self is losing its hold. You see, the truth is very simple. The life that lived as Joel Goldsmith is the same life that lives as you. The same I that expressed through his form is expressing through your form. There are not many lives. There is only one life, one presence, one consciousness, appearing as many forms. His passing merely revealed in a clear and quiet way, the truth that has always been true for all. And when you recognize this, your own life begins to change, not because you adopt new beliefs, but because you awaken to the reality that has been present from the beginning. My friends, having contemplated the nature of immortality and the quiet clarity that accompanied those final days, let us now turn to the practical dimension of this teaching. For truth, to be truth, must be lived. It must permeate our daily experience. It must become the atmosphere through which we meet every appearance, whether joyful or challenging. And so the question arises, how do we approach our own mortality in the same spirit of peace and recognition? How do we prepare not for death but for the continual unveiling of life? The first and most essential practice is the practice of silence without agenda. Sit quietly each day, even for only a few minutes, without asking, without desiring, without seeking to change any condition. Simply rest in the awareness that I am here. This silence allows the mind to sink beneath the turbulence of thought and touch the deep stillness in which the presence reveals itself, not because we call it forth, but because it is already here. This simple resting begins to loosen the belief that life is something we must manage or protect. Second, begin to see the body with new eyes. The body is not to be despised, nor feared, nor clung to. It is the instrument through which life expresses in this dimension for a season. You care for it naturally, the way one tends to a garden or maintains a home, but you do so without identifying with it. The body may change, but the eye that witnesses the change is unchanging. As you gently, repeatedly see the body as an appearance in consciousness rather than the container of consciousness, you begin to feel an inner freedom that no condition can shake. Third, allow fear thoughts to arise without resisting them. Do not make a battle of the mind. When fear appears, simply acknowledge, this too is a universal belief appearing in my awareness. Do not claim it as yours. Do not struggle with it. Let it pass as clouds pass through the sky. The sky is not disturbed by the clouds, and consciousness is not disturbed by thoughts unless we identify with them. In this way, fear loses its foothold. Fourth, develop the habit of returning again and again to the simple recognition of I am, not as a phrase, not as an affirmation, but as a lived awareness. In moments of stillness, feel into this presence. In moments of difficulty, remember it. In moments of joy, acknowledge it. The more often you return to this recognition, the more natural it becomes. Eventually, it becomes spontaneous, effortless, automatic. And this is the beginning of living from the Christ within. Fifth, release the notion that you must purify the mind, perfect the personality, or perform great spiritual feats. The spiritual life is not a project. It is not a path of self-improvement. It is simply the steady relaxing of the false sense of self until the true emerges in clarity. You do not build the Christ identity. You uncover it, and you uncover it by doing less, not more. Sixth, contemplate often the truth that whatever can die was never you. This contemplation need not be morbid or heavy. It is liberating. Let the thought arise in simplicity. If this body were to fall away this very moment, would the witnessing presence disappear with it? And immediately you will feel the answer, no, I remain. You experience this every night when the body sleeps. You experience it in deep silence when the sense of me disappears. You experience it in moments of awareness when there is no thinker, only presence. Finally, recognize that the preparation for death is simply the preparation for life. There is no special practice for the final day. There is only the daily recognition of truth until the fear-based identity dissolves. Whether you are young or old, healthy or facing illness, the work is always the same. Return to the I am. Rest in the presence. Let the personal sense diminish. Let the eternal self reveal itself. In this way, you approach mortality not as a fearful event, but as a gentle transition, no more significant than the passing of one season into another. When that moment comes, it will be met with the same peace, the same unbroken awareness, the same recognition that guided every step of your life. For the one who knows the I am does not prepare for death. He abides in life, and life continues. My friends, let us come now to a gentle close, and as we do, I would invite you to rest not in thought, not in theory, but in the quiet awareness that is present even now, even here. For everything that has been shared, every truth that has unfolded, every glimpse into the eternal nature of your being has had but one purpose: to lead you home to the awareness of the presence that lives you. There is no journey to complete. There is no finish line to reach. There is no distant spiritual attainment awaiting you in some far-off future. What you seek, you already are. The life you have feared losing has never been yours to lose, for it is not personal life. It is the infinite expressing itself as individual consciousness, one life, one being, one I. When we look upon the transition called death, we do not look upon an ending. We look upon a passing of form, a shedding of the temporary garment. But you, the witnessing presence, are not touched by it. You are the same before, during, and after. The form may fall away, yes, but the life that animates the form does not fall away. It simply withdraws from one appearance and continues, unbroken, as it always has. And so the truth is this: you are not moving toward death. You are moving moment by moment into deeper recognition of life. You are not approaching a point of darkness. You are moving toward the dawning of your own eternal nature. Every fear, every challenge, every moment of stillness, every step on the path, these are not random events. They are invitations, each one calling you to rest more deeply in the I that is God. Let your heart be at peace. You are not fragile. You are not temporary. You are not a creature struggling to survive in a dangerous world. You are the very presence of God, made visible as individual being. You are the light of the Christ, the awareness of I am, appearing here, appearing now, expressing itself in the unique form that the world calls you. The body is a beautiful instrument. Use it, care for it, cherish it while it serves its purpose, but do not mistake it for your life. Let it come, let it go, let it change, let it rest. Through all of this, you remain the silent, watching, eternal self. If you do nothing else as a result of these words, let it be this: turn within each day, even for a moment, and recognize the presence that lives you. Let that recognition become your refuge, your strength, your peace. For in that recognition lies the end of fear, the end of struggle, the end of the belief in separation. In that recognition lies your freedom. And when the time comes for this form to be released, it will not be a moment of terror. It will be a moment of surrender into the very life that has carried you from the beginning. You will recognize it not as the end, but as the continuation of what has always been. The presence that lives you now will live you then. The I that is aware now will be aware then. The life that you are will simply flow into a new expression. Rest, then, in the assurance that nothing real can be lost, nothing eternal can be threatened, and you are eternal. I am is your name. I am is your identity. I am is your immortality. And in that I am, we are one.
The final realization is not about seeking, it is about ceasing the search. The profound shift in consciousness comes when we understand, deeply and irrevocably, that the kingdom is not some distant shore to be reached through striving, but the very ground upon which we stand. The greatest error we perpetuate is the belief that the divine presence is a separate entity, waiting outside of us to be pleased, earned, or begged. There is only one place where the infinite presence resides, and that is within the deepest core of your own being. It is the life that you are, the awareness that observes the stillness beneath the storm of human thought. This presence is not a concept for intellectual debate. It is a practical, living reality available here and now. All sense of struggle, all exhaustion from striving, is rooted in the mistaken belief that you, as a finite person, must create your own good. We try to mold the world with our limited willpower, using our strength, our anxiety, and our fear to force outcomes. But I tell you, all frustration dissolves when the conscious realization dawns, I am not the door. The great secret, the one that changes how you see life, is simply this: to stand back and let the divine flow take over. Your job is not to build the bridge. Your job is to step into the realization that the bridge already exists, built of invisible spiritual substance. When we cease our frantic, personal effort to fix, heal, or accomplish, we create the necessary spiritual vacuum for the law of God to fulfill itself. Sink into the stillness. Let go of the need to control the next moment. Do not condemn the outer appearance, but instead turn resolutely inward to the center of your being where the I dwells. Do not speak about lack, do not discuss disease, and do not entertain fear. Simply be still and know that the I within you is the totality of all fulfillment, all health, and all supply. This realization grants you immunity. You become immune to the world's panic, immune to the cycle of condemnation, and immune to the pressure of performance. Why? Because the life that constitutes your individual existence is God's life. You cannot be separated from your source, regardless of the outer testimony of the senses. This is the final breath of all human illusion. Rest in that I, be still. Let the flow be. The divine is within the ground of being. The realization of God's presence is not a distant goal, but an immediate reality within the core of your own being, eliminating the need to search or strive externally. Cessation of human effort. True fulfillment begins when you consciously realize, I am not the door. All struggle and anxiety cease when you stop trying to use finite willpower to create or force good outcomes. Rest in the divine flow. Success comes from standing back and allowing the law of God, the divine flow, to fulfill itself, creating a spiritual vacuum for manifestation without personal effort. Turn inward to the I. The practical path is to ignore outer appearances, lack, fear, disease, and resolutely turn to the inner center of stillness where the I, the totality of fulfillment and health, dwells. Spiritual immunity. Identifying your individual existence as God's life grants you freedom from the world's panic, condemnation, and performance pressure, establishing an unshakable connection to the source. This profound insight, which declares that the kingdom is not a distant shore, but the very ground upon which we stand, is the complete revolution of human thought. The greatest burden we carry is the fundamental misconception that we are separate from the divine source. We are perpetually engaged in the monumental task of seeking God, as though the infinite had somehow misplaced us, or as though we, the finite, could travel the vast distance required to reach the omnipresence. This constant striving, this weary, lifelong prayer for reunion, is rooted in the illusion of distance, but the truth, the core reality that eradicates all fear and all striving, is that the divine presence resides not in the heavens above you, but within the deepest core of your own being. It is an immediate reality. It is not a promise scheduled for delivery after a lifetime of sacrifice. It is the life that you are now. Look within and discover the awareness that observes the world, the simple, quiet consciousness that predates all of your human thoughts, fears, and judgments. That still center, that silent, observing I, is the very location where the infinite presence expresses its totality in your individuality. We must move beyond the intellectualization of this concept. It is not a dogma to be debated or a philosophy to be discussed. It is the practical, living reality that you must consciously realize and accept. The error that has bound humanity is the projection of divinity outward, creating a separate entity that must be appeased, earned, or begged for assistance. This projection makes us forever dependent, forever feeling less than. But when you turn resolutely inward, you discover that the source and the individual consciousness are indivisible. This profound realization that the kingdom is the ground you stand on means that you are not on a journey toward a destination. The realization is instantaneous because the presence is already here. All sense of lack, all exhaustion from striving, dissolves in this single revelation. Why should a river strive to reach the ocean when it recognizes it is already of the ocean's substance? Your human effort to fix, heal, or achieve is unnecessary because the spiritual substance of all fulfillment is already established as the foundation of your conscious existence. To understand that the infinite presence resides within is to claim spiritual sovereignty. It means that the universe exists to sustain the identity that you are. You cease to be a beggar at the door of life and become the conscious expression of the creative principle. When a challenge arises in the outer world, be it financial, physical, or relational, you do not engage with the appearance of the problem. You do not try to rearrange the circumstances. Instead, you turn inward, back to the core of your being, and affirm the single, unshakable truth. I am not the doer, the life that I am is the source. This inward turning creates the necessary spiritual vacuum, allowing the divine flow to take over. You realize your job is not to build the bridge over the chasm of lack, but to step onto the certainty that the bridge of spiritual substance already exists, built by the presence within you. This is the end of the futile search. Rest in the knowledge that you cannot be separated from your source, regardless of what the outer senses testify. The peace that passeth all understanding is found here, in this immediate reality, in the cessation of the search and the acknowledgement that you are already whole. I acknowledge your request to expand upon Keynote No. 2. Focusing on the cessation of human effort, derived from the selected text in the canvas. The true source of human weariness is the relentless belief in personal responsibility for creation. We carry upon our shoulders the titanic burden of the world, attempting to arrange circumstances, manipulate outcomes, and force reality into the shape we think it should take. We mistakenly believe that we, the finite and individualized expression, must generate our own health, secure our own supply, and engineer our own happiness. This belief is the root of all struggle, the treadmill that keeps the human mind spinning in anxiety and fear. Look closely at what your so-called effort actually entails. It is not spiritual labor, it is mental agitation. It involves hours of obsessive worry, frantic planning, analyzing scarcity, and engaging in the sheer brute force of willpower. We use our limited strength, which fades by evening, our anxieties, which cloud our judgment, and our fear, which actively repels the good we seek, all in a futile attempt to mold the infinite with the finite. I tell you, all frustration dissolves at the conscious realization, I am not the doer. This realization is the great spiritual release. It is the moment the heavy stone of responsibility slips from your shoulder. When you declare, I am not the doer, you are not advocating for passivity or lethargy. You are affirming a revolutionary truth. You are acknowledging that the only operative power, the only creative force in the universe, is the divine flow, the infinite presence, the I that dwells within you. Since that presence is already whole, complete, and universally supplied, your effort to improve upon perfection is not merely exhausting, it is an act of spiritual interference. The illusion of human doing forces you to look to finite channels for your good, the job, the relationship, the savings account. When you step back and realize you are not the creator of your good, you acknowledge that your supply is not dependent upon these finite forms, but upon the infinite source that expresses through them. The frustration of failure, the exhaustion of constantly managing external events, only occurs when the personal self is desperately trying to be the source. But the moment you drop the rope of personal will and simply relax into the truth, a profound shift occurs. You cease to be the struggling, demanding personality and become the clear channel through which the divine can express. When we cease our frantic, personal effort to fix, heal, or accomplish, we create the necessary spiritual vacuum for the law of God to fulfill itself. The personal will is like static, obscuring the clear transmission of grace. By surrendering the will, by ceasing the search and the struggle, we allow the already existing perfection of the infinite to manifest as our visible experience. This is the practical application of spiritual living. Standing back, watching with inner certainty, and allowing the flow to be. The divine does not require your strained efforts, it only requires your quiet acknowledgement. The great secret, the one that profoundly changes how you perceive and experience life, is simply this: to stand back and let the divine flow take over. Human existence is generally characterized by a state of constant pushing, a mental and emotional straining against perceived resistance. We live in a delusion of cause and effect where we believe our finite actions must precede and precipitate infinite outcomes. We spend our energy desperately trying to push the world into alignment, unaware that the universe is already perfectly aligned with the divine intent. The moment of revelation, the great turning point, is the profound recognition that your true job is not to build the bridge over the chasm of human problem. Your job is merely to step onto the realization that the bridge already exists, built of invisible, eternal spiritual substance. This flow is the activity of the infinite principle in your experience. It operates independently of your fear, your anxiety, or your personal efforts. If you are striving to accomplish, to heal, or to secure your good, you are inadvertently setting up a friction, a resistance to the very current that seeks to carry you. Imagine trying to row a boat upstream while simultaneously arguing with the force of the river. It is an exhausting and needless endeavor. The spiritual discipline is not exertion, it is non-resistance. It is the conscious relinquishing of the oars, trusting the current of life itself to carry you precisely where you need to be, providing every requirement along the way. When we cease our frantic, personal effort to fix, heal, or accomplish, we create the necessary spiritual vacuum for the law of God to fulfill itself. The human mind, when active and striving is noisy and full of images of lack, limitation, and impending disaster. This noise effectively blocks the quiet, continuous transmission of divine good. By sinking into the stillness, by truly letting go of the need to control the next moment, you silence the personal self and open the door to the universal intelligence. This quietness is not emptiness, it is the fullness of the spirit waiting for recognition. In that vacuum, where personal will has stepped aside, the law rushes in to express its inherent perfection. The fundamental truth is that the divine flow is eternally active, eternally creative, and eternally sustaining. It does not need your permission to be, it only needs your non-interference to express as your life. Therefore, the moment you realize, the power that constitutes my being is the same power that governs the cosmos, you understand that your supply, your security, and your health are not subjects for human manipulation. They are facts of the spiritual structure of existence. You simply rest in that the silent, invisible center within you. To rest in the flow is to maintain an inner posture of unwavering certainty. It means that when the outer appearance screams of chaos or lack, you do not condemn it, you do not fight it. Instead, you turn resolutely inward, affirming the principle that supersedes the appearance. You stand firm on the reality that the principle is absolute, and its fulfillment is not contingent upon the world's conditions, but upon your realization of its presence. This conscious standing back allows the flow to manifest effortlessly. You become an instrument of grace rather than an anxious planner. The bridge is built, the way is cleared, and the supply is delivered, not because you worked harder, but because you finally yielded to the reality that the work had already been completed in consciousness. Rest in that be still, let the flow be. The practical pathway out of the human dilemma begins with a profound redirection of attention. The unawakened mind is perpetually engaged in an external assessment of reality. It scrutinizes the bank balance, analyzes the symptoms of the body, and condemns the chaos in the world, believing that solution lies in rearranging these external effects. But this external focus is precisely the trap. By granting power to the outer appearance of lack, fear, or disease, we unwittingly perpetuate it. The appearance is merely the shadow cast by an incomplete or fearful consciousness. It is not the ultimate reality. The spiritual discipline required is to ignore the outer appearance and resolutely turn inward to the center of stillness where the divine I resides. You must understand that the five senses are reliable reporters of the human condition, but they are unreliable witnesses to the spiritual reality. When the outer environment screams of limitation, the impulse of the carnal mind is to fight that limitation, to try to solve the problem on its own level. This is like trying to fix the image on a screen by manipulating the screen itself, rather than adjusting the source of the projection. The spiritual master never engages with the shadow, he engages solely with the light. This process of turning inward is the sacred pivot. It is the moment you withdraw your belief and your energy from the false testimony of the senses and ground yourself in the certain knowledge of the infinite presence within. This interior dwelling place, the I, is the quiet, invisible center that is the totality of all fulfillment, all health, and all supply. This I is the divine identity you wear. It is not dependent on external proof or validation. It simply is. Therefore, when the testimony of the senses is negative, when the doctor delivers a difficult diagnosis or the ledger shows scarcity, your work is not to debate, argue, or panic. Your work is to declare, I will not entertain this appearance. I will be still and know that the I within me is untouched by this world. You must consciously refuse to speak about lack. You must turn away from discussing disease, and you must decline to entertain fear. These are the tools of the illusion, and you must lay them down. The I within is the seamless perfection of God's manifestation. It requires nothing added and nothing taken away. By standing back from the outward claimer and sinking into the consciousness of the I, you allow the infinite resources of the principle to become visible in your experience. You are not striving to make a new reality. You are simply realizing the reality that has always been present. This inward realization automatically dissolves the outward appearance, for the shadow cannot remain when the light is fully acknowledged. The power of this inner sanctuary is absolute. Rest in the I. Be still. The inevitable result of truly turning inward and resting in the principle is the acquisition of spiritual immunity. This is not a mere philosophical concept, but a palpable, practical change in your experience. Having realized that your individual existence is the manifestation of God's life, you establish a spiritual foundation that is utterly unshakable. The world continues its relentless dance of panic, fear, and scarcity, but you, having awakened to the truth of your being, are no longer susceptible to its infectious anxiety. You become immune to the universal pressure to perform, to judge, and to fear the future. This immunity grants you freedom from the cycle of condemnation. Condemnation of self, of others, or of circumstances is always rooted in the belief in duality and separation. The personal self constantly measures its output against an imagined standard, collapsing into guilt or fear when it falls short. But when you identify your life as the divine life, you recognize that there is nothing to condemn. The life that you are is perfect and whole. If a human plan fails, it is not a failure of your being, but merely the failure of the finite method. The awakened individual does not judge the self. They simply return to the inner sanctuary, knowing that the principle remains intact and ready to express a superior form. This inner sanctuary is where you become sovereign. Your worth is no longer external, tied to wealth, social standing, or success. It is absolute, inherent, and non-negotiable because it is derived directly from the source. The performance pressure that exhausts so many is based entirely on the lie that you must earn your supply or prove your worth to the infinite. But the moment the realization dawns that the life animating your form is the one eternal, undivided life, that your individual being is the very flow of the Creator, that pressure vanishes. You are not trying to be worthy, you are worth. In its purest expression, the connection between you and the source is not a bridge that can be burned or a partnership that can be dissolved. It is identity. This is the meaning of the unshakable connection. Can a drop of water be separated from the substance of the ocean? Can a ray of sunlight be separated from the sun itself? No. Your security, therefore, is not stored in a bank or dependent on a political climate. It is secured by the immutable law of the infinite. This inner certainty is what allows you to move through life with a calm, effortless grace. You walk not by the sight of the eyes, but by the certainty of the inner conviction. This realization is the final, practical step, living every moment from the understanding that the power that constitutes your being is the same power that governs the cosmos. The fear of tomorrow is rendered obsolete because the source that sustained you today is the eternal, inexhaustible supply that will sustain you tomorrow. You no longer strive to make things happen, you simply live led by the flow, demonstrating the quiet, powerful sovereignty of the realized soul, fully protected and utterly sustained by the divine presence within. We have explored the great spiritual transition, the move from human effort to divine realization. Understand that every teaching, every discipline, is merely an instruction on how to cease. You are not striving for union, you are realizing unity. The burden of creation is not yours, it is the function of the indwelling Spirit. Take this truth into your daily experience. The peace you seek is not hidden in tomorrow's success, but in today's stillness. The supply you pursue is not outside your grasp, it is the substance of the I Am. Drop the oars of personal will. Let go of the need to argue with the appearance. Rest in the glorious, invisible certainty that the principle of all perfection lives, moves, and has its being as your own consciousness. This is the only work, the silent acknowledgement of the completed truth. The result is the spontaneous unfolding of grace in your life, effortless, immediate, and whole. The only necessary action is the conscious surrender to the omnipotent I, allowing it now to be fully realized as the seamless garment of your individual experience.
Most people pray as if God needs to be convinced, persuaded, or informed about their problems. They beg, plead, and repeat their requests, hoping that somehow their words will finally reach divine ears. But Joel Goldsmith discovered something that changes everything about prayer. Jesus revealed a mystical secret that most believers completely miss when he said that before they ask, the answer already exists. This is not about positive thinking or manifesting techniques. This is about understanding the true nature of divine consciousness and how prayer actually works in the spiritual dimension. When you grasp this principle, your entire relationship with God transforms from begging to recognition, from asking to realizing what already is. The secret lies in understanding that God's nature is completeness, wholeness, and infinite supply existing right now in this present moment. Nothing you ask for needs to be created or sent to you because it already exists in consciousness. Your role is not to convince God to give you something, but to recognize what is already present in divine reality. Joel Goldsmith taught that the kingdom of heaven is not a future destination, but a present reality of consciousness. When Jesus said the kingdom is within you, he meant that all divine qualities, healing, abundance, and peace already exist in your true spiritual identity right now. The problem is not that these things are absent, but that you have not recognized their presence. Traditional prayer operates from a sense of separation and lack. You pray as if you are separate from God, asking an external deity to send you something you do not have. But mystical Christianity reveals that you and the Father are one. The divine consciousness that created everything is the consciousness that you are. There is no separation except in human belief. When you pray from this understanding, you are not asking God to do something. You are recognizing what God has already established in spiritual reality. Before you even recognized your need, the divine answer existed in consciousness. Your prayer becomes a moment of spiritual awareness rather than a petition for intervention. Think about how the sun shines before anyone asks for light. It radiates constantly whether you request it or not, because shining is its nature. God's nature is infinite good, perpetual giving, and constant presence. Divine love does not wait for your prayer to begin flowing. It has been flowing eternally, and your prayer simply opens your awareness to receive what has always been available. Joel Goldsmith called this recognition prayer versus petition prayer. Petition prayer says, "Please give me what I lack." Recognition prayer says, "I recognize what you have already given." One operates from emptiness and separation. The other operates from fullness and unity. The difference in results is absolutely transformative. This is why some prayers seem unanswered while others bring immediate transformation. When you pray from lack, you reinforce the belief in separation and absence. When you pray from recognition, you align with the truth of spiritual reality, where wholeness already exists. You stop trying to change God's mind and start changing your own perception. The practical application begins with a shift in how you approach every prayer moment. Instead of telling God about your problem and asking for a solution, you pause and recognize that infinite intelligence already knows and has already provided. Before your words form, the divine answer exists in consciousness waiting for your recognition and acceptance. Linda struggled with chronic anxiety for years, praying desperately for peace every single day. She would beg God to take away her fears and give her calm. Nothing changed until she learned this principle from Joel Goldsmith's teachings. She stopped asking God to create peace for her and began recognizing that divine peace already existed as her true spiritual nature. Within 3 weeks of practicing recognition prayer, Linda experienced a shift she had never known in 15 years of petition prayer. The anxiety did not disappear instantly, but she began accessing moments of profound peace that felt like remembering something she had always known. She was not creating peace through her prayer, but uncovering the peace that had always been present beneath her fearful thoughts. Joel Goldsmith discovered this principle not through theological study alone, but through direct spiritual experience. He found that when he stopped trying to demonstrate things through prayer, and instead rested in the understanding that God's completeness already included everything, miracles became natural occurrences rather than desperate attempts to manipulate divine will into action. This teaching goes back to the earliest Christian mystics who understood that Christ consciousness is not something you achieve, but something you recognize as your eternal spiritual identity. The Apostle Paul wrote that you are complete in him, not will be complete someday, already complete right now. Your spiritual perfection is not something you earn or create through good behavior or correct prayers. The reason this seems difficult to accept is that physical senses report lack, limitation, sickness, and problems. Your eyes see dysfunction, your body feels pain, your bank account shows insufficiency. But Joel Goldsmith taught that spiritual reality exists prior to and independent of physical appearances. What is true in consciousness is more real than what appears in form. Christopher was a businessman facing potential bankruptcy after his partner embezzled funds. He prayed constantly for God to send money, open doors, and rescue his failing company. Every prayer reinforced his sense of desperation and lack. His spiritual mentor introduced him to Joel Goldsmith's teaching about praying from the understanding that divine intelligence already knows and has already answered. Christopher began a new prayer practice. Instead of begging for rescue, he spent time in silence recognizing that infinite intelligence governed his life and that right action already existed in consciousness. He stopped trying to tell God what to do and started resting in trust that divine wisdom was already working through every situation even when he could not see how. Over 2 months, unexpected solutions began emerging. A former client reached out with a major contract. An attorney discovered legal remedies Christopher had not known existed. A new business partner appeared with both skills and capital. Christopher realized he had not created these solutions through his prayers, but had opened his awareness to recognize what divine intelligence had already arranged before he even knew he needed them. Amanda dealt with a deteriorating relationship with her adult daughter for over 5 years. They barely spoke, and every conversation ended in conflict. Amanda prayed repeatedly for God to change her daughter's heart and heal their relationship. She felt her prayers went unheard, because nothing improved despite her faithful petitions every single day. When Amanda learned about recognition prayer, she realized she had been praying as if God needed to create something new rather than recognizing what already existed. She began a practice of acknowledging that divine love already connected her and her daughter in spiritual reality, even when human appearances showed separation and conflict. Amanda stopped praying for God to do something and started recognizing that divine love was already present in both of them. Within 6 weeks, her daughter called unexpectedly to talk. The conversation flowed naturally without the usual tension. Over the next 4 months, they rebuilt connection gradually. Amanda understood that the love had always been there. Her recognition prayer had simply opened her awareness to what existed beneath the surface conflict all along. The key distinction Joel Goldsmith emphasized is that you are not using prayer to get God to do something, but using prayer to recognize what God has already done. Divine consciousness has already established wholeness, harmony, abundance, and peace as the truth of spiritual reality. Your prayer does not create these conditions, but reveals them to your awareness. This is why Jesus could say that before they ask, the answer already exists, not because God predicts what you will need, but because God's nature is complete and infinite. Everything that divine love would give is already given in the eternal now of spiritual consciousness. Your prayer is the moment you stop looking for something external and start recognizing something internal and eternal. When you truly understand this principle, prayer becomes restful, instead of desperate. You are not trying to convince or persuade. You are not hoping God will finally hear you. You are simply opening your awareness to recognize the divine reality that has always been present, but which you had not previously perceived through the cloud of fear and lack-based thinking. If these transformation stories inspire you, like this video to help others find these teachings, subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment, what healing journey resonated most with you? The practice of recognition prayer requires developing spiritual perception beyond physical senses. Joel Goldsmith taught a technique he called listening prayer, or the practice of receptivity. Instead of speaking your needs to God, you become silent and listen for the still small voice of truth that speaks in consciousness when the human mind becomes quiet and receptive. This listening is not waiting to hear audible words, but opening your awareness to receive spiritual impressions, intuitive guidance, and the felt sense of divine presence. In this silence, you begin to perceive that consciousness is not empty, but full of divine intelligence already knowing and already acting, even before your human awareness recognizes it. Start with just 5 minutes of silent receptivity after stating your recognition that infinite intelligence already knows and has already answered. Do not try to make something happen. Simply rest in trust that divine wisdom is already present in your consciousness. Over time, this practice develops your ability to perceive spiritual reality beyond physical appearances and limitations. Another complementary practice is what Joel Goldsmith called impersonalization. When you face a problem or challenge, the human tendency is to personalize it as your problem that you must solve. But impersonalization means recognizing that what appears as your problem is actually a universal false belief in separation from God that has no power in spiritual reality. For example, if you face financial lack, impersonalization means recognizing that lack is not a personal condition, but a false belief in separation from infinite supply. If you experience illness, impersonalization means seeing that disease is not your personal burden, but a false belief in separation from divine wholeness. This shifts your prayer from asking God to fix your problem to recognizing that the problem has no reality in spiritual consciousness. Robert practiced this when diagnosed with a serious heart condition. Instead of claiming the disease as his personal burden, he practiced impersonalizing it as a false belief in separation from divine wholeness. He recognized that in spiritual reality, his true identity was complete and perfect, because God's creation is complete and perfect. Over 8 months of treatment and prayer practice, his condition improved beyond medical expectations. Joel Goldsmith also taught the importance of understanding prayer as consciousness rather than words. Many people think prayer is about saying the right words, using correct formulas, or repeating specific phrases enough times. But spiritual prayer is the activity of consciousness recognizing truth, regardless of the words used or not used at all. You can pray effectively without speaking a single word by simply resting in the awareness of God's presence and completeness. You can pray while washing dishes, walking in nature, or sitting in traffic by maintaining the consciousness that divine intelligence governs every moment and has already established harmony in spiritual reality, even when circumstances appear chaotic. This understanding frees you from the burden of trying to pray enough or correctly enough. Your consciousness of truth is the prayer, not your eloquent words or lengthy petitions. When you maintain awareness that before they ask the answer already exists, you are praying constantly even in moments when you speak no words at all. The practice of gratitude complements recognition prayer powerfully because gratitude acknowledges what already is, rather than focusing on what is not. When you give thanks before you see the answer in physical form, you are practicing the same principle Jesus demonstrated when he thanked God before the manifestation appeared. Joel Goldsmith taught that gratitude is not about being thankful that God will do something in the future, but being grateful for what God has already established in spiritual reality now. You thank God not for what you hope to receive, but for what already exists in consciousness, waiting for your recognition and acceptance into experience. Nicole struggled with chronic pain for 3 years. She began practicing gratitude not for healing she hoped would come, but for the wholeness that already existed in her spiritual identity. She thanked divine consciousness for the completeness that was true about her even when physical sensation reported otherwise. Over 5 months, her pain levels decreased significantly. She understood that her gratitude had not created wholeness, but had opened her awareness to recognize it. The most common challenge people face with recognition prayer is that physical circumstances seem to contradict spiritual truth. Your bank account shows debt while you try to recognize infinite supply. Your body feels pain while you try to recognize divine wholeness. The gap between spiritual reality and physical appearance can feel impossible to bridge. Joel Goldsmith addressed this directly. He taught that spiritual reality and physical appearance operate in different dimensions. What is true in consciousness is causative. What appears in form is effect. When you try to change the effect directly through petition prayer, you are working at the wrong level. When you recognize the truth in consciousness, the effect gradually aligns with the cause. This does not mean denying what you experience physically. It means understanding that physical conditions are not the final truth about you. Your spiritual identity as God's expression is the deeper truth, and as you maintain consciousness of this truth, the physical experience gradually transforms to reflect it. This process usually unfolds over time rather than instantly. Another challenge is the ingrained habit of petition prayer. After years or decades of asking God for things, the switch to recognition prayer feels unnatural and even wrong. You may feel like you are not really praying if you are not asking for something specific or listing your needs before God. Daniel experienced this exact struggle. He had prayed petition prayers his entire life and felt guilty when he tried recognition prayer because it seemed like he was not being humble or acknowledging his neediness before God. His breakthrough came when he realized that recognition prayer is actually more honoring to God because it acknowledges divine completeness rather than suggesting God has somehow failed to provide. Recognition prayer says God has already given everything and you are simply opening your awareness to receive it. Petition prayer inadvertently suggests God is withholding and needs to be convinced to give. When Daniel saw it this way, he understood that recognition prayer was actually deeper trust and greater faith than petition prayer ever was. His guilt dissolved and his practice deepened significantly. Some people struggle because they do not experience immediate results. They try recognition prayer for a week or two, see no change in circumstances, and conclude the teaching does not work. They return to petition prayer or give up on prayer altogether. This happens because they misunderstand the nature of spiritual practice and transformation. Joel Goldsmith emphasized that recognition prayer is not a technique to manipulate outcomes, but a practice of spiritual awareness that gradually transforms consciousness. As consciousness changes, experience changes. But consciousness does not usually shift overnight after years of contrary thinking. The practice requires patience, persistence, and trust that spiritual truth is working even when physical appearances have not yet caught up. Elizabeth practiced recognition prayer for her troubled marriage for 3 months before she noticed any change. She was tempted to quit many times, but she persisted in recognizing that divine love already connected her and her husband in spiritual reality. Small shifts began appearing in month 4. By month 8, their relationship had transformed in ways she could not have predicted or manufactured through willpower alone. The final common challenge is feeling like you are lying to yourself when circumstances are objectively difficult. If you are recognizing abundance while facing eviction, or recognizing wholeness while dealing with serious illness, your rational mind protests that you are denying reality and engaging in dangerous delusion. Joel Goldsmith's response was that you are not denying your human experience, but recognizing a deeper spiritual reality that exists simultaneously. You acknowledge what your senses report, while also knowing that spiritual truth is more fundamental and more real. You are not pretending the problem does not exist. You are recognizing that the problem exists in the dimension of effect, while spiritual wholeness exists in the dimension of cause. This is a subtle but crucial distinction. You can seek medical treatment while recognizing divine wholeness. You can take practical action about finances while recognizing infinite supply. You are not choosing between human responsibility and spiritual truth. You are bringing spiritual awareness into human experience, trusting that consciousness of truth will work through whatever practical channels are appropriate. The spiritual and practical work together, not against each other. If these challenge-breaking techniques speak to your heart, like to support this content, subscribe for advanced spiritual practices, and comment. Which obstacle are you ready to transform now? As you develop proficiency with recognition prayer, you begin to live from a completely different foundation. Instead of moving through life waiting for problems to arise so you can ask God to fix them, you maintain constant awareness that divine intelligence already governs every moment and situation. This becomes your default consciousness, rather than something you remember only during crisis. Joel Goldsmith called this practicing the presence of God. It means maintaining awareness throughout your day that infinite wisdom is present right now, that divine love is operating right now, that spiritual completeness exists right now, regardless of appearances. This is not constant verbal prayer, but constant consciousness of truth underlying every activity. Joshua integrated this into his demanding career as an emergency room physician. He began each shift with a moment of recognizing that divine intelligence already knew every patient who would arrive and had already established the right action for each situation. During intense moments, he would silently recognize this truth again. He found that solutions and calm came more easily when he operated from this consciousness. Advanced practice includes recognizing this truth for others, not just yourself. When someone shares a problem with you, instead of immediately joining them and seeing the problem as real and overwhelming, you silently recognize that divine consciousness already knows and has already answered for this person, even if they do not yet perceive it. This is not about telling them their problem is not real or dismissing their suffering. You offer appropriate compassion and practical help, but internally you maintain consciousness of their spiritual wholeness and perfection. This consciousness can have tangible effects because consciousness is not limited by physical proximity or individual minds. We all participate in one infinite consciousness. Stephanie practiced this with her elderly father who was declining rapidly with dementia. While providing loving care and practical support, she maintained inner recognition that his true spiritual identity remained perfect and complete in divine consciousness. She could not know how this would manifest physically, but she trusted the truth regardless of appearances. Her father experienced periods of unexpected clarity that doctors could not explain. Stephanie understood she had not created this, but had recognized what was always true. The integration also includes recognizing this principle in challenging relationships and difficult people. When someone treats you poorly or creates conflict, the human reaction is to pray for God to change them or remove them from your life. But advanced recognition prayer sees that the divine nature already exists in them just as much as in you, hidden beneath false beliefs and fear. You recognize that the person's true spiritual identity is love, wisdom, and wholeness, even when their behavior contradicts this completely. You do not have to tolerate abuse or stay in harmful situations. You can establish appropriate boundaries, but your consciousness remains anchored in spiritual truth about them, rather than locked into reaction to their behavior. Kevin used this approach with an extremely difficult colleague who seemed determined to undermine him professionally. Instead of fighting back or asking God to get rid of this person, Kevin practiced recognizing that divine wisdom already governed both of them and that harmony already existed in spiritual reality. Over several months, the colleague's behavior shifted noticeably. Eventually, the colleague apologized and explained he had been dealing with personal crisis. The relationship transformed completely. The ultimate integration is living from the understanding that nothing needs to be demonstrated because everything already is. This sounds paradoxical because you still have experiences, make choices, and see changes in your life. But the consciousness shift is profound. You stop living in constant effort to make things happen and start living in trust that divine intelligence is already operating. Joel Goldsmith taught that this is true spiritual rest. Not physical inactivity, but inner rest, from the burden of believing you must create, manipulate, or force outcomes through your personal will. You take appropriate action in the world, but the action flows from inner guidance rather than anxious striving. You trust the process because you know that before you ask, the answer already exists. This does not mean passivity or fatalism. It means aligned action from spiritual consciousness rather than desperate action from fear and lack. Ashley experienced this in her creative work. She stopped striving desperately for success and started creating from recognition that divine creativity already flowed through her. Her work improved dramatically. Opportunities appeared naturally. She produced more with less effort, because she was working with spiritual truth rather than against it. When you truly understand that before they ask, the answer already exists, your entire relationship with prayer, God, and life itself transforms fundamentally. You are no longer a beggar approaching a reluctant deity hoping for scraps. You are consciousness itself recognizing its own divine nature and completeness. This is the mystical Christianity that Jesus taught, but which institutional religion often obscured. The transformation goes deeper than improved circumstances. Though circumstances often do improve, the real transformation is internal. You develop unshakable peace that comes from knowing that divine intelligence governs your life regardless of appearances. You access joy that does not depend on external conditions. You experience freedom from the constant anxiety of trying to make life work through human effort alone. Joel Goldsmith lived this consciousness and taught thousands of students worldwide to do the same. His message was simple but revolutionary. Stop asking God to do something and start recognizing what God has already done. Stop praying from lack and start praying from fullness. Stop trying to demonstrate things and start resting in what already is. This is the secret of answered prayer. The practical result is that you begin to experience what many call miracles, but which are actually natural outcomes of living in alignment with spiritual truth. Solutions appear that you could not have engineered. Healing happens through unexpected channels. Resources arrive just when needed. Relationships transform. Opportunities emerge from nowhere. Divine timing orchestrates circumstances with precision that human planning could never achieve. But you understand, these are not miracles in the sense of God breaking natural laws for your benefit. They are the natural manifestation of spiritual law operating when your consciousness aligns with truth. Cause and effect are always operating. When the cause is consciousness of divine completeness, the effect is experience that reflects completeness. Before you even ask, the divine answer already exists in consciousness waiting to manifest in form. This understanding removes the mystery and uncertainty from spiritual life. You are not hoping God will maybe answer your prayers if you are good enough or faithful enough. You are recognizing that spiritual reality is already complete and your consciousness is opening to receive what has always been available. The outcome is certain because it is based on spiritual law rather than divine whim. The teaching also addresses one of the deepest human fears, which is the fear that you are alone, abandoned, or unsupported by the universe. When you understand that before you ask, the answer already exists, you know with absolute certainty that you are never alone. Divine intelligence is always present, always aware, always providing exactly what consciousness requires for its unfoldment. This does not mean you get everything your human ego wants. It means you receive what divine wisdom knows is right for your spiritual development and life purpose. Sometimes this includes challenges that strengthen you. Sometimes it includes delays that prepare you. Sometimes it includes unexpected directions that serve purposes you cannot yet see. But you trust the process because you know infinite intelligence is operating. Joel Goldsmith students reported again and again that this trust was the greatest gift of the teaching, not the demonstrations or improved circumstances, though these were wonderful, but the deep inner knowing that they were held, guided, and provided for by infinite love that knew them completely and had answered before they even recognized they had questions. This knowing changed everything about how they moved through life. So what happens when you truly understand that before they ask, divine consciousness has already answered? You stop living as a beggar and start living as consciousness itself expressing divine nature. You stop praying from desperation and start praying from recognition. You stop trying to change God's mind and start changing your own awareness to perceive what God has already established. The journey begins today with a simple shift in how you approach prayer. The next time you face a challenge or need, pause before asking God for something. Instead, take a moment to recognize that infinite intelligence already knows, already cares, and has already established the perfect answer in spiritual consciousness. Your role is not to convince or inform God, but to open your awareness to receive what already exists. This is Joel Goldsmith's gift to the world. The mystical Christianity that Jesus taught but which got buried under centuries of religious doctrine, focused on human unworthiness and divine distance. You are not separate from God. You are the expression of divine consciousness. And in that consciousness, everything you could ever need already exists, waiting for your recognition. Before you ask, it is already given. If your spiritual understanding expanded through these Joel Goldsmith secrets, like this video. Subscribe for more transformative teachings, and comment, "I am transformed," to confirm your new path.